Welcome to the Unlearn podcast. On this show, I'm delighted to be joined by John T. Marcante, the former Global CIO of Vanguard. Now, I had the pleasure to meet John over 10 years ago as Vanguard were starting a massive cultural and technology transformation, which he was leading. It was instantly a pleasure to spend time with him when I saw him and the CEOs and chairmen of Vanguard get up in front of a huge audience and talk about how they and the company needed to change. It was inspiring from the first moment, and that initiative went on to be a huge success for the business. Currently, he's the CIO in residence for Deloitte, where he serves as an independent advisor, offering strategic guidance, perspective, and coaching for a number of businesses. He led Vanguard as a global CIO, reporting to the chairman, and helped steer Vanguard's growth to nearly $9 trillion throughout global disruption in the financial services market. He's a very special character with a huge amount of gratitude, humanist, and understanding about how to lead great companies. A champion of servant leadership with so many stories that will shock you and yet have led to great growth in himself and the businesses and teams that he's worked with. We dive into little touches on what led the transformation at Vanguard, his own personal story, how understanding and connecting with customers helped him build great products and teams, as well as some of his own personal life lessons from working with his dad at a very young age as he explored his interest in technology. This is a fantastic show that's both personal and highly professional for people who are looking to become senior leaders in global organizations. It's a pleasure to have John on the show, so let's dive in. Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast. The experiences you have is, again, fascinating to me, being part of one of the world's most established financial institutions, building it, growing it, taking it, as you said, we got to meet because you were leading a massive cultural transformation in that business. Right. And it was a pleasure to see it in operation. You know, you got to go and spend time with you and all your direct reports, or whatever it was, 200, 300 people in one room in Philadelphia in the Vanguard head office as you were kicking this off. And you know, the thing that always struck me is that you had the CEO, presidents of the entire business there to lead it with you. You know, that is always a huge sign for me that people are real about this stuff. And you were up there sharing your own journey with your team about what you felt you were going to have to do and unlearn along the way. So instantly, you know, you won me over with just doing that alone. So, you know, it's been an amazing story at Vanguard that the transformation that the business has gone through and that you had the time there. So thinking back, if you will, even to those early days, you had to stand in front of this massive organization and say, we're going to do things differently. You know, we're going to change. I'm going to change. Your executive CEOs are talking about changing, and you know, Vanguard is a business that's built on, in many ways, like its heritage, doing the things that have made it successful, not jumping around when they see an opportunity. Like it's, you know, it's those are sort of the cultural aspects, or maybe even pillars that might be part of a lot of the culture that made it so successful. So what were some of the things that you were feeling on that day when you were like, how are we going to lead this transformation? How are we going to change this culture to be something different?
So I think I would go back to a point you just made, which is, you know, if this transformation is a technology transformation, if it's a technology initiative, then it's already lost, right? Because nothing's a technology initiative. Everything is, you know, a business, a client transformation, and that alignment. And I always felt like that the transformation was a C-suite and CEO-led transformation. You know, technology, lean, agile, they'll roll out across the company, not just in technology, but across the company, really took that level of focus and alignment. And we didn't have it day one. Like, so it was an interesting story for us. And I don't remember what year you were with us, but I want to say about 2013 or so.
Yeah, that feels about right. Yeah, that's good. We'll 10 years we can celebrate our 10-year anniversary doing this. Yeah.
I think but around 2013, earlier that part, and the reason you saw, the chairman Bill McNabb on stage and addressing everyone is like Bill and I we had convinced the entire senior staff at that point early on to go out to Silicon Valley and really like immerse ourselves in what was happening. I think it was 2011. Eric Ries wrote the Lean Startup. You might have wrote the Lean Enterprise at 2014 or so, but so much was absolutely happening there. So we took the team out. We met with large tech companies. We met with venture capitalists. We met with startups, and just what we heard, what we saw, what we felt was this tremendous, speed, how fast things were getting done. We felt this insurgency, like, startups wanted to be, David, not Goliath, right? And we felt like Goliath.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Remember that we started with it as a small company, and how skilled these people were and how hungry they were. Like, that's what we saw on the plane back. We're kind of debriefing, Bill and I, and let's face it, the stuff that made us successful in the past is just not going to make us successful in the future. And we took stock of the brutal facts. I mean, we were slow and expensive. I mean, I'm talking about technology, but I'm also talking about business. We were doing things traditionally that we've always done. We were very insular at the time. If you talk to anyone, it was kind of like, if it wasn't built here, it wasn't good. Like, that's amazing. That's that's not a great attitude. And we were disengaged. And I came back to, after running some businesses at Vanguard in 2012, to be the global head, the Global CIO. And then I was blessed with we stopped sending our internal survey. We started sending our external, like we had an external firm come in and measure engagement for us. And it was the first engagement survey. And I found out that global technology organization was the lowest performing, the lowest engagement. In fact, only 27% of the crew were engaged in what they. So let's fast forward to that session. Like, what were we trying to do? Well, one I thought was going to be really difficult, which was kind of like build the right foundation for speed. Turned out to be the easiest part of this. The second thing we were trying to do was like get the right culture. That tended to be the hardest part of this stuff. So, the right foundation, we put a stake in the ground to be cloud native in 2014. So it was like, hey, listen, by 2014, everything new that we do is going to be cloud native. And then we went on a long journey to refactor, not just replatform, but actually modernize the legacy environments. But I think more importantly, the cultural aspect of it, right? We had failed early on. We tried to roll out lean and agile and train every new group. Like, marketing was going to be organized in agile pods, HR, and every business operation was going to run on lean principles. And we tried to roll that out. We failed, and we realized, my God, we went from the top of the organization, like, this is important, to the bottom of the organization, like, we're going to train you. And we left the critical core of the organization, which is all the leadership in the middle, alone. And we realized that was a mistake. So we stopped and we trained people on new ways of leading, really servant leadership, going from what in the past was command and control that really worked well for, a highly regulated environment, to a more servant leadership approach. And then we slowly rolled out agile and lean across the organization, which meant a lot of changes to, budgeting and HR policies. But I think more importantly, a lot of fast feedback cycles from clients that just frankly made us better. And engagement went up. I can't tell you the magic, employee engagement, but I could tell you that we ended at an 81 or 82% of the global IT organization being fully engaged in the mission of the organization and serving clients. And it was a tremendous thing. And I'd go back to, hey, we were better leaders, servant leaders. We were faster. And if you're a developer like me, I was a developer in high school, you want to see your code in the hands of clients as fast as humanly possible. And you want to be part of a cross-functional team that is delivering on real outcomes, real client outcomes. outcomes. And that's really what you want. So anyway, hopefully that wasn't too long of a story, but yeah, that you happened to enter at the moment that we were going through that big
Yeah,
transformation.
and it was, you could feel like there was a sea change trying to happen across the company, right? And they're always special moments for me. One of the privileges of doing that role of getting to spend times with lots of different companies, like you do see some of the like leading indicators about whether this thing's going to work or not, or how committed people are to it, right? And what stood out to me is that you had the senior people up there, you had people having open dialogue, debate, pushback in a massive room, like people willing to speak up about, well, what about this and how are we going to handle that? And it was welcomed, and that those are the kind of environments for me, as you say, like that to me is servant leadership in a way. It's like creating a forum where people can have difficult conversations in the open and we're not shying away from them. And if we don't know the answers, people can say, we'll figure it out. And if there are opportunities, well, let's go execute something. And those things are very, very special, And I think for me, when I had got to see a lot of this stuff in many companies, that's what just instantly warmed me to what you were doing, and just gave me a lot of confidence going, okay, this is real. Like these people want to make this happen. But you sort of alluded to one of the key points of it, though, is this idea of serving customers is such again, another one of these sort of foundational principles that is core to what Vanguard is about. And you mentioned a little bit about there's these structures that you can do, right? You can deploy cloud computing, you can set up cross-functional teams, but the service of all those activities is to get people connected with their customers, because that's what gets us all the
Yeah.
excitement, right? It's like I go to work, I bust my ass, but if I do something and nobody uses it, it's frustrating. But if I actually get real feedback from customers to say, you've made my life better, there's no better feeling in the world of work than doing that with customers. So talk a little bit about how you sort of, if you will, like sort of reconnected, if you will, that engagement from the classic maybe disengagement many companies feel, where people are just feel like they're on a hamster wheel doing stuff and it goes into the ether, to actually connecting these teams back to customer outcomes and like feedback that actually invigorates them to do more. So how did you start to tackle that problem?
Well, yeah, I think was interesting. I just had a conversation about this, about someone saying, like, how do you do that? Because, often technology organizations are kind of behind the scenes, and then you've got all these layers of people. And it's like, yeah, we were committed to creating these teams cross-functionally direct to clients. And that meant like the business organizations had their own technology people who translated require. Remember these days, translated require. So we took them all and we retrained them. Some ended up in leading being product owners. Some ended up going back to the business. And it's like, listen, if you want to drive engagement, then give a group of people an outcome that's meaningful to clients and give them access to clients. And you said, yes, it's wonderful when they could do something, they see the impact, and you made my life easier. But often step one is, what? That's crazy. I wasn't thinking that. And it's like, okay, that's feedback. And if you have a nimble, very, very nimble foundation that allows you to very quickly take that feedback and turn it. Because I can remember being a developer, and my first project in corporate America was making somebody's life easy. And I had failed like week after week after week, but the woman was so happy. And I was like, why are you so happy? She was a manager of this group. I said, why are you so happy? I keep failing. She goes, no, you're getting closer. And then I finally delivered. It was the best day of my life. I mean, I delivered. She goes, you don't understand. Like, this takes 5 of us to do. And your program now allows us to do other stuff that we can never get to. This has been amazing. I never felt more engaged. So that stuck with me, that having direct client access and having a nimble way, a quick way to react matters. Now, I'll tell you what else matters. I'm going to riff for a while.
Yeah, always. That's what we're here for. Yeah, damn right.
So when I was in the business, I was running the high net worth business for Vanguard. So it's a big P&L for Vanguard. And I can remember having one of our financial associates ran in and said, listen, like, you got to talk to a client. It's a really big client. They have a lot of money at Vanguard, but they're really, really angry. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I called the client and we're talking, and he said, I want to let you know, you are the worst firm on Wall Street. And I'm like, I've never heard that before. I mean, first of all, we're not on Wall Street, but I mean, we are. Well, we're big investment manager and asset manager, right? Like, so I'm like, okay, well, tell me what happened. And he said, well, every time he said, I run a hedge fund. Every time I want to move money, you're the worst firm. Your portfolio managers need to talk to me. You're always putting up these gates, and I'm like, oh. And he's like, yeah, I move money like this, and you're the worst firm. And I said, I get it. I totally get this now. I said, listen, we're owned by our shareholders. So the people who are invested in this fund that you're now transacting in, they want to maximize their returns. But when you move money and the portfolio managers they don't know that, and it's not a long-term investment, or you're moving money at big dollar amounts, you create volatility, all the people in that fund suffer. You're at the wrong company. Like, we don't value that. We don't value that. That guy said, oh my God, no one explained that to me. It makes so much sense. I am taking all of my hedge fund money out of Vanguard. And I thought, oh God, man, I wonder how that's going to turn out for me. But he said something really, really important, which was a story we always tell. And it was like this next statement was really, really important. He said, I am doubling the size of my personal investments at Vanguard because I want to be protected like that. I want to know that you have my back. And I was like, holy cow. So part of getting people aligned is giving them access to clients, but part of it is not every business is good business. Stick to your mission and purpose, and be there and have your backs, have your client back. Now you also have to have your employees back. So I'll drift on one more story and then I'll shut up.
No, I love these. These are great. This is why we do the podcast. We need these like anecdotes for people to hear them. They're great.
Oh, I tell this story. I usually have a picture of a very angry person on the screen. And so this happened to me, again, I had a high net worth investor call me and said, I want my financial associate fired. They're rude to me. I'm like, I've never heard this. Like, we pride ourselves on customer service. I'm like, listen, like, do you mind? We record every interaction, whether it's video or that stuff. Like, I'll go back and I promise you that I will listen to every single interaction. I will get back to you. And I listened to every single interaction, and this guy was awful. And the associate was so patient. And the advisor was so patient. And having a woman advisor, and she was incredibly good and one of the star people, So you're like, what is going on here? I call the client back and I'm like, listen, I listened to it and you were absolutely terrible. You were awful. I don't know what to tell you, but can you just let us know where you want the money to be sent? Because we got transferred you out. We're firing you as a client. You're an abusive client. I'd like to fire you as a client. And he left. And little did I know that story ekes out because the associate begins to say, like the financial winner said, like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm more important than a high net worth investor. And I'm like, of course you're more important than a high net worth investor. Like, because you are the face of Vanguard, right? You are the mission of the organization. So I think when we go back to like what's driving engagement? Yes, it's getting your work in front of clients. Yes, it's getting direct client feedbacks. Yes, it's getting a quick foundation, but it's also that you feel connected to the mission of the organization. Like, what I do every day has to be connected, but the mission, I have to sleep well at night knowing that the company has my back, but more importantly, that I'm actually doing good for society. And if you can do those two things, I think it's amazing. And if the leadership team is actually a servant leadership team and puts you out front as an employee, then I think you got something special. So I've always felt that was the mission that Jack Bogle, by the way, Jack used to travel with me to the two investor meetings and stuff. He was the founder of the company. He was an amazing person. I never directly worked for him because, he was the chairman back when I was a peon. But when I got to be a business leader, I got to spend some time with him. Just an amazing person. And that transferred to every CEO, that mission we never lost. I hope we never do.
No, and this is one of the things I think that, again, it shines about the company, like sticking to the values, leaning into your principles, and making tough decisions around that. I'm sure there's lots of folks listening to these examples and go, wow, could I be in that moment where, someone who runs a massive hedge fund, moving their businesses, corporate funds in and out of a fund, and in essence say to them, this is not the right context to do what you're trying to do, right? That's a brave moment, which again, as you say, led to a great outcome. Just as when you're there on the employee side, where again you have the sense of power sits with this high net worth individual who has poor behavior towards your team, and yet you're leaning into backing the values that sort of bring the team and the company to life, right? So it's funny because often when you've been through those experiences, you sort of are like, no, that's the right thing to do. But for people who don't get to be in those experiences a lot, it feels like very hard to sort of stick to your guns. So what helped you learn that in your own leadership journey? Because those are the moments, I think, that until you push through them, they feel like they're walls that aren't, you can't permeate them. So what helped you take those sort of steps to do that?
Yeah, I think it's a true trust factor in the organization, that the organization will have your back. So it's easy, the talk's easy, but the walk isn't so easy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So the walk isn't so easy because your day is filled with decisions. And I think if you have a culture in your organization, and Barry, you described this a moment ago, where people can voice their opinion, and it can be a dissenting opinion, but it's listened to. And even if you don't know the answer, that you're committed to getting the answer, I think you then build trust in the organization.
Right on. Yeah.
I can remember a staff meeting of mine. We had a staff meeting. We're always having big presentations, and there were always something going on that was critical. Something going on that's critical. I don't remember what the thing. This is why it was interesting what you remember. I remember, we had a senior leader woman who was really focused on this one point. And the room, I could tell the room was lost. And I finally said, well, what's bugging you about this? I know, I could tell something bugging. And as she blew up into some issue that had to do with diversity. And it really didn't have to do with the point that the program we were dealing with, but her issue was so spot on that no one else in the room picked up. But the way she delivered it was really emotional and really forceful. And I stopped, and everyone looked at me like, what are you going to do now? And I just said, thank you. Listen, that was the most uncomfortable I have been in this seat ever. But thank you, because again, it takes guts to say that. It takes guts to say that to the room. It takes guts to say that to everyone, but it takes guts to say that. And I assure you, we will figure it out together. I don't have the answer to this. It wasn't an immediate, you could solve this tomorrow. But I think if you have that environment, you can make a mistake, but as long as the intention was good, then you're fine. If your intention isn't good and you make a mistake, well, then we'll deal with that later, right? But if you're doing work for a client and your intention is good, you have nothing to worry about, even if it goes south. And I felt that. I felt like this client, I'm going to lose this client. But this isn't the mission of the organization. This is not the business. This is not good business for us. I felt like I would have someone behind me. And I think if you work for an organization like that, and if you're a leader, isn't it our job to create these safe spots? Isn't it our job to kind of create that? And don't we all perform better when we're listened to and we have a right to say, hey, the emperor has no clothes on, which, by the way, after 29 years of working at a company, that's another story why people say, well, how could you work at a company for that long? Like, because I worked at GE for 7.5 and then Vanguard for 29. I'm like, listen, like, there's times where people would come in my office and like, bam, you're full of crap. And this, you thought that was good, what you said. This is how they took it. And I valued that. Like, that's the direct voice of the floor. You're like, I actually thought that was, you would take it this way, but you took it that way. So thank you.
Well, look, one of the things, we're certainly talking about though as well is great examples of leadership, right? And you obviously had a chance to be exposed to that with the founders of the company, with the various leaders that, took very senior leadership roles throughout the company, as well as folks that demonstrated leadership by walking into your office and calling you out from time to time, right? One of the other people you'd mentioned to me before is that you were quite inspired by your father, right? And some of the lessons he taught you. So tell us a little bit about, some of the things that more in your personal life that helped you sort of like do these very difficult, high visibility, high stakes roles. Like what were some of the support that, if you will, around you to help you to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I guess I got to go back in history. So my dad passed away about 8 years ago. We just went through Father's Day recently. So, I was kind of reflecting on, like we all do, what is your history and your father and your mother and your parents and any influence coaches and teachers have on you along the way. But I was a developer in high school. I mentioned that. I told no one in high school, by the way. This was back when the Trash 80 from Radio Shack was out. I'm really dating myself now, Barry. We had, so being a developer in high school, my dad did not have a college degree, but he was early in computer science. In fact, he was a CAD/CAM programmer. He worked for a large steel company. I won't go through it. Steel company is no longer there, but he was a Fortran programmer too. And I was studying PL1. Don't ask me why I was studying PL1 at the time, but I'm like, I have PL1 book, and my dad had just gotten a dummy terminal. You remember these dummy terminals? They would go to a modem with the dip switches, and you get the beep, and you get connected to a mainframe. Well, one day he went to work, and I was like, I've seen my dad do this a million times. I was always interested in technology. We shared that, my dad and I. No one else, 3 older brothers, no one else in the family kind of shared that passion for technology, but I did with my dad. So I knew, like, he had this password written on the terminal. It wasn't a sticky. I think if I remember, I don't even think, well, no sticky. It was actually like written on it with a marker. And so I hope I don't get in trouble for telling this story. But one summer day, I'm like, I'm going in. He's at work. I'm going in. I'm going to see if I can get connected. And that TSO prompt, I'm on the mainframe. And I'm like, brilliant. So now I'm searching for a PL1 compiler. I find the PL1 compiler. I start writing a Star Trek program. It's kind of like, hot, cold, photon torpedoes have certain spread across your screen, and, the Romulan ship's over here, but you can't see, you have to guess. So I started writing this, and of course, we're in a different generation. Like, that generation programmed at night. That's why my dad had that. Like,
Yeah.
You had mainframe computing processing at night, but you didn't during the day. I don't know anything about business. Like, so and I'm also an internet programmer. You think I'm going to fix all of those errors in a compile? I'm going to fix it and try it again. Fix it and try it again. So I finally get this program running, and it's running and running. And it's like, and then all of a sudden, beep, I'm off, and I can't get back on. So my dad later that night comes home, and he's like, "Who was in my office?" My brother's like, "What? No one, no. Oh, he was in your office, of course." My dad grabs me, and I could tell he's angry. So I'm like, "Okay, what did you do?" And I'm like, "Wow, I signed on. I watched you do this. Signed on. I used your password. I got a TSO prompt. I found a PL1 compiler." He's like, "No, we don't have a PL1 compiler." And I'm like, because he's portrait programmer. And I'm like, no, you do. And he's like, then he gets back on. He should show me. And I'm like, I did this. I wrote this code. I compiled. He goes, John, my boss called me and said, whatever you're running is in the loop. It's chewing up resources during the day. Stop running it. And I had to say, it's not me. So they probably disabled the ID or whatever. And that's how I got caught. But it was this moment right here. My dad said, listen, show me your program. And we went and debugged my program for the loop. It was that moment of like, and only later, after 9/11, I ran global technology operations, all infrastructure across the globe for Vanguard after 9/11. Only when I ran global infrastructure did I actually realize what issues I might have been causing at that time. And by the way, cybersecurity wasn't the same back then, right? Like you were right in. But my dad was gracious. He could have been angry. He could have scolded me. He could have, but instead he showed genuine interest in what I was doing and genuine interest in helping me become the person I am today. And I think as a father, that's our mission. As a leader, that's our mission. Like, be gracious, be gracious. Even when someone doesn't hit the record button.
All right, folks, I have to come clean on this one. So in the 150 odd shows that we've done here, John again was able to demonstrate his graciousness, where we did a show a couple of weeks ago. Great show, as today's show has been super fun. And it was probably about, 3 days after the show, I was about to download this and post it and realized I hadn't hit the record button. So I had to write, I think I named it my most embarrassing email ever and sent it to John. And I think you can already tell anyone listening, the response was nothing but graciousness. And you know what, let's do another show. And honestly, like, I feel like that's been a little bit of a gift for me, because everybody's only going to get these 40 odd minutes of you, but I've had 80 of these, just so many great stories. So,
oh, Barry, I always enjoy talking to you. So listen, like for me, it was a blast. It was a blast to get two shots at it.
That's it, So for you then, as you're looking forward now, right? It's a new, as you say, new stage of your career, right? You've done the huge jobs, you have all this opportunity in front of you, figuring out what the next steps are to do. I'm sure it's something different to think about. What are some of the things that are most exciting for you, or you're enjoying the most?
Yeah, I think so. I happened to be talking to Dan Roberts about this at one point in time. I think he just did a podcast about like chapter 2. Like, what do you you spend so much time in chapter 1 focused on delivering all these great capabilities and being the best leader as you can. And of course, you have time for work, you have time for family, you have time for community, and then maybe a little bit time for self. That usually happens at around 5:15 a.m. when you like a little time for self. But when you're going into chapter 2, there's not a lot of help. So you reach out to people. We were talking about this before. We reach out to people that you know or that you want to know. And you say, how did you do it? Like, what did you think about? So I had a board member at Vanguard actually tell me, think about what's important. Like, what are the buckets of things that you feel are important? So for me, one was, man, I want to be part of coaching and developing the next generation of leaders. That I want to be part of that team, whatever team that is. Count me in, because that was the best part of my job. Second, technology. I mean, like, come on now. Technology, AI, generative AI. I mean, like, I need to be involved in this stuff. My wife is constantly like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm researching, I'm looking, I love this stuff. So something in the world of technology was a bucket of mine. And then the last one was just simple, like, hey, giving back to the community. If there's a way for me to make the community better, I was a basketball coach, a soccer coach, a baseball coach, whatever it is, giving back to the community really matters. So those are the 3 buckets. And then they said something very wise, like, how much time do you want to spend? in those buckets because you have to protect the other important times. So,
Yeah.
After deciding that, then, I became the CIO in residence at Deloitte, which is really fun job. Part of the job is, running the CIO academies, being a dean, the co-dean of the CIO academies, which run for like 3.5 days. It runs twice a year. Then we also do a CDAO one and a CISO one. So not just CIO,
Yeah, great.
right? And then it's getting
Yeah.
these leaders ready for the next generation, the next set of challenges, and doing that. I love doing that. It's also coaching and clients and helping clients develop into leaders, and it's also advising in technology and technology journey. So one part I do that. The second part, I own my own company doing coaching and development and also technology work. I'm doing some work back at Vanguard right now. So that's kind of interesting in a couple other companies. And then I do some advising, startup advising, venture advising, board advising. And you know what? That fills up all of my time. And I feel like
I can feel it already. Yeah, that sounds like a 70-week or hour-a-week calendar. You know what you're describing there.
like I said to you, it's an honor to be at this stage in my life where I can work with the people I adore and, do the things that I love.
Yeah, I just think it's such a great mentality to have, and maybe even one that like it when I hear you say that, it just keeps reminding me, where I enjoy the most is working with really great people doing interesting people doing hard things. That's always been an inspiration for me. And as long as I'm doing that, it gives me energy. As tough as the challenge is, it like you say, it's like this feedback that you get from doing great things from customers. Coaching is great when you see someone you're working with get a breakthrough and that they figure out what it is they want to do or how they want to lead, or they unlock things in themselves. They're just, it's such a, that is a gift in itself to be able to give that to people. And I've no doubt, like, just as I said, I'm lucky. I've got 80 minutes. Most people are getting their 40 minutes of this show, but they get a sense of how much you can offer people. And so yeah, I just want to say, for everyone listening, I'm sure is who's going to enjoy this and get a huge amount out of it, yeah, a huge thank you for that. And maybe just keep doing it. Like, one of the things about having so many great people on this show, it's sort of like my personal development. I think of it like this: I get to talk to folks about their life experiences, problems that they faced, challenges they tackled, how they evolved. And it always leaves me sort of inspired about how can I take those lessons and apply them to myself. And, it's just been a pleasure to have you on twice. And maybe we'll convince you to come back again in another couple of cycles and share, what you're up to next, because I've no doubt it's going to be something fun and interesting.
Always glad. I had a boss one time who said something very similar. I took it to heart. He said, listen, you should always be the combination of all of the good things that you witness in life and ignore all the bad things. And if you can become that person, it's an amazing thing. So don't we all stand on the shoulders of giants, Barry?
Right on, and that means a lot to me too as well. Like I said, I always think of where I grew up in a big family in a small town with not a whole lot of things, and the people before that helped us even get to that place. And I think there, like you say, there's a duty to this stuff, and I'm grateful for that. And again, really appreciate you sharing some of your fantastic lessons, anecdotes, and gratitude of dealing with my mistakes. It's awesome to have you in the show.
It was a blessing to get to talk to you. So thank you, Barry. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.